When I'm in client sessions, there's layers, right? There's layers of everything. Because I don't just deal with the here and now body. I don't deal with this lifetime solely, independently. Because when you look at your soul journey, it comes through different lifetimes and different experiences. So it's multifaceted and it's multi-layered. And of course, when you look at it like that, if you imagine this lifetime and the experiences that you have just in one lifetime, and you times that by 1 million or more, and think of the damage, I guess, if we're thinking about healing and the point of healing, which is there's a wound. You think about the wounds that have been caused in other lifetimes and how they all run potentially at the same time. And we see our bodies right here and now as physical, but we have an energetic body where all of these other lifetimes may or may not be running at the same time based around themes. They've got wounds too. And so when I'm working with clients, the layering is so deep. It's so complicated. Sometimes it's not, but it can be. And recently, in the last months, the layering has been very complicated. You know, you'll go one moment to a priority you'll be looking at. Let's say it's your sacred geometry or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden it lays in with another priority while you're in the middle of like doing a deep dive. And so it kind of builds this weird tiering kind of MC Escher structure, you know, the artist that has all the stairways. If anyone knows MC Escher, go and look it up. It was one of my favorite artists when I was growing up. But it's the complexity of looking at a big picture and which direction do I go and where am I actually going? Because he draws stairways that cross over each other, but it's eternal. it's complicated. And so when I'm dealing with the depths of energy, but also the physical body and the psychology of someone as their whole, it weaves. This structure weaves in and out, this decoding, this unraveling. It's like a thread in a cross stitch, right? I've made a mistake here, but which thread do I actually pull to reverse and rewind what has been created so that I can go and correct the stitch? Because you put the stitch back in place, but it's in the proper positioning. So when you're working with the energy field, this is what you're working with. Doctors, nurses, physical healers in this lifetime deal with a wound, right? They can see it. They know the structure of how the physical body is working, and then they use their medicine for that. But when you're an energy healer, you don't physically see what you're working with. So you have to kind of imagine it. Imagine the layers. Imagine how you're working. And I guess as a practitioner, everyone will be working in a different aspect to that. And I'll come back to this in a minute. Yeah, so it's this deeper healing and this complexity at the moment. And what I'm calling it is the final clearing, the final clearings right now. We're getting an opportunity, particularly for mutable signs, because I'm seeing those themes come through actually with mutable sign clients. They're more poignant in their need for sessions. They're like, no, I've worked through something. There's something else now. And, you know, we're having quick and fast sessions and they are moving fast. We've talked about the quickening before, but the quickening is specifically happening with these mutable signs. And so they're working through these deeper layers, these final complex layers to get them in readiness for this transit that's happening. What did you call it? The world point?
Yeah. The 0 degrees of Aries.
It's happening deep and very complex. And the way that they've explained it to me, and I've only had this realization today, because also as a energetic practitioner, you know, I'm working in, I guess, a fantasy. It's a different reality, right? You know, I'm not working on a physical wound where, you know, I know it's infected. I clear away the slough. I debride it. I cover it. antibacterial, all the things. I give antibiotics, for all my nursing friends out there. I hope I haven't slashed that, but and I've got the process right. But, you physically know what you're dealing with. A broken leg, you reset it. You've got x-rays, you've got all these tools. But when you're working with the energy bodies, you can't actually really see what you're working with. And so what they explained to me this morning, which is the coolest concept, is all the different energy bodies that we talk about, the chakric systems, the meridians. In the ethereal, it's one body with different networks. Just like in the physical body, we're working with one body with different networks, vascular system, circulatory system, whatever. And so if you simplify it down to that and you just work as a whole, so that this is for the practitioners that are healers, I guess, this insight. So if you're working with, you work on a trifecta anyway. You work with your physical, you work with your spiritual, and you work with your psychological, which includes your emotional and your mental. And then when you look at physical, you see it as a physical thing. But now we need to be looking at our spiritual bodies as one being tied to the other two, but with all of the networks that we think are separate, they're tied in together. It's just like the vascular system, the nervous system, all these systems, but on a spiritual level. It's kind of cool. I haven't even processed that. It's only just come to me today. And so when you're looking at the spiritual being and you think about, in contrast, the physical being, and, you're at war, you're standing out on the battlefield, you get shot. You've got a a bullet in you, right? The process will be take that person away, remove the bullet, irrigate the wound, heal the wound. And then there's a time there where you go through rehabilitation because, it might have been close to an organ or whatever. And so it's like when we're healing our spiritual bodies, we need to look at it like that as well. There's a process. People come in and they're like, one and done. I want to have one session and be done. And it's not that. Sometimes for one particular issue that's surface level, sure, I'm not saying no to that. Like we can work with that. But when you're talking about Saturn in your chart and how that works for you and these deeper layers of dark nights of the soul, these depths of experience that we need to rise up and get out of the depths to see what we're actually dealing with. You don't know the treasure until you bring it to the surface of light. When you're dealing with the spiritual energy, why do we always expect to be one and done? In these other lifetimes and these layers of these lifetimes that we've got experiences and wounds with, I'll say wounds because, it's a practical way to think about these experiences. Why do we think we're dealing with these wounds with just a Band-Aid? It takes time. We go in, we need to find the bullet in the spiritual lifetime that's happening, remove it, because the point of Saturn, I guess, is it hasn't been removed before now. You've been standing out there, you've been shot multiple times, you've been in battle so many times, you've got how many bullets in your body and none of them been removed because you've been too busy in battle, experiencing and not stopping and having the reflection piece. And so, the point of the healing then is looking for the bullets, removing them, irrigating it, healing it, and then having a recovery period where that's where you get on the level of your transformation or your ascension, where you're like, I know now not to go stand out on that battlefield anymore with that core belief or, working through all these things that we try and work through as humans, because I've done the work. I've been to the doctor. I've had all this removal of this stuff. I know what I got shot with or what the situation was or what damage. I know where the bruises are and what they're from. I think Saturn is like bringing that in for some of these signs to be like, okay, deep dive, just do a full system clearing of your energetic field. Recognize, remove what you've got there and recognize where it came from so you don't make the same mistakes again. And mistakes are beautiful things because they're an opportunity to do better next time. You learn from them and you move through them. So yeah, it's kind of like a heavy energy thinking about it like that. But this morning it gave me so much context to understanding how we're working with the energetic bodies and why we have this false expectation that you do one thing and you're done. But the beauty of when you look at the energetic body as a single form, as we do in a physical form, and just looking at the currents and the layers and the build up of that, is then we can go, oh, okay, that bullet has affected 4 systems. And so that's the layering, that's the cross stitch, that's the removing. And so you're healing multiple layers at the same time. And the point is, with the final clearings that are happening at the moment, this is the complexity at which people's bodies, beings are working. They are going to that depths now. They're not just doing surface layer clearings or healings or recovery. They're doing deep, complicated, woven tapestries where they've gone, I've made a couple of wrong stitches there. We need to go back and correct the tapestry. And that tapestry might be eons old. And so when we're talking about what we're actually dealing with, core beliefs, and not just superficial core beliefs, like you build them down to like really hardcore core beliefs. So one of mine recently has been around safety and security. If we're talking about Saturn return, the whole concept of 96 to 99 with the rug being pulled out from underneath me of like what my family unit looked like and me trying to rebuild that now over the last 20 years. That has only just come to light or to the surface or the recovery point of my spiritual journey or my spiritual healing now, 25 years on or whatever it is, 20, 29 years or whatever, whatever we're at, or 30 years, 29.
Because Saturn's at the same point that he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So almost 30 years. Yeah. It's taken me to like figure this out, how to do better in the relationships. So yeah, some of us are doing this deep tapestry healing and reweaving. I wouldn't even say it's healing, it's just reweaving because you get an opportunity to do over. Something that I heard along the way, which is really cool, I can't remember who said this, so I'm sorry if anyone listens and they know where this reference came from, but when you make a decision for change or transformation that is different to your current patterning or your previous patterning, you actually rewrite the past as well as rewriting the future. And that explains that reweaving of the tapestry beautifully. It's not like you're pulling the whole thing apart to start again. You're just finding the particular threads that are out of alignment and then pulling them out and then weaving them back through. So the picture becomes clearer. You're doing a tapestry of flowers. It might not look like flowers because you've taken a few wrong turns along the way. And you haven't cleared those things. You haven't learnt how to do those threads yet. So yes, this deeper clearing that is happening now is very prominent. It is a theme. And I feel like with these mutable signs, it's definitely happening as a theme right now. And we have a little bit more time to do this deep inner work before we get to that pinnacle point of, zero in Aries, I think you said. Then the next signs, the cardinal signs, will probably go through this deep inner reweaving of their tapestries on this very complex level where it's not just single themes anymore around generational trauma. The genealogy will fuse into that, and then past life connections will also fuse into that. But we're looking at it from like lots of different higher levels as well as the deeper healing. It's very complicated at the moment. All the clients that are coming in, firstly, they sit down and they're like, okay, you ready for me? Well, yeah, I am, because this is why I do what I do. I love it. I love the complexity of working through people's tapestries. But it is complicated. because it's not your standard structure. When you're working with kinesiology, you've got a process, and sometimes you need to kind of move around that process to understand where you're actually taking the threads from. And so when you're getting to the point where you've rewoven your tapestry, or you've actually removed the tapestry, you need to reweave the threads back in. And that you need to know what stitches you're doing. And that's where some tools and things come in for you to be able to go into the next phase of where you're working towards. And that's different for everybody. Some of the clients are very complicated. I've got one in particular, and this is one that is kind of one of my greatest learnings. And when they come in, it's not frequently, in the physical world, has chronic pain and can't figure out, proactive in doing what they need to do to try and, mitigate all these things that are going on, like lots of different stuff. And in a session about 6 weeks ago, I was able to see their energy in entirety for the very first time after 2 years of working with this person. And what it looked like, and this comes back to this war zone, because the reason why I came up with the rules, now it's making sense to me why I'm talking about all the bullets, is there is a warrior archetype within this individual, and having multiple lifetimes as a warrior, as a protector. So, you would think they'd be in battle all the time for whatever reason, protector of gold or, kingdoms or whatever. And one of the things that came through when I got to see the energy for the first time is they were wearing armor. When you're the warrior archetype and you've got that much armor on, it wasn't one layer of armor. It was, can I really see what is going on here? There was a moment when they let me see them. Let me see there was armor. It was so well hidden. It just looked like a bodysuit. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I got you now. I've got you. I know what's going on here. You're hiding. You're hiding yourself. So all this layer of armor came off, layers and layers and layers. And we got to the being, the soul energy of this being. It was disgusting. Not in its energy of being an awful person, but it was so battered and bruised and swollen and damaged. How could that person be healing with other practitioners when they firstly can't take their energetic armor off to even get to the root physical energetic being to go, okay, this is what we're dealing with now? Wild. Absolutely wild. Like, if I could explain it, it's just horrific what this person has endured in other lifetimes. This is how deep some of these healings are for people. Just one example, and yeah, that's just to remove the armor to deal with the being, let alone actually going in and weaving through the tapestries of, can you imagine how many lifetimes or experiences of exposure as a warrior? And that's, then you have to work on, I guess, the psychological aspect of that and marrying it all together.
So if I could just put my hand up to be a case study for a second.
Yeah.
Because I've been going through some things just in the last couple of weeks, and I mentioned in a previous episode that it was since this feels like a kind of a follow-on episode because we're talking about the themes of Saturn. We're talking about what's come through for you, which is the final clearings. And I've very much been in that. And I don't really look at myself as being a mutable sign person. However, as I'm sitting here, I'm like, my Venus is at 27 degrees of Sagittarius. And Saturn, over the last 2 to 2.5 years that he's been transiting through Pisces, has been squaring my Venus. Back and forth. He's gone back and forth. This is the thing about Saturn. There's so many retrogrades. I cannot tell you how many times he has touched my Venus in a square, which is arguably one of the most hostile I don't know if that's the right word, aspects in astrology, a square. It's the friction. So there's going to be friction between those two signs. And we're talking about Saturn's energy, and we're talking about, so Saturn's energy, which is the lessons and the learnings that we're talking about. And then we're talking about Venus, which is self-worth, money, love, self-love, self-value. And in the previous episode, I shared in the last 2 weeks, since Saturn is moving forward now at 25 degrees, he's moving forward back through. So he's going to go over my 27-degree Venus placement in a square for the last time in the next few months. And what has just recently come up to me as an ingrained belief system is that I have to work hard to make money. My self-worth is attached to my physical output in the work that I do. If it doesn't be deemed that I'm working hard, if family don't see that she's like working hard and doing things and striving, then I'm not valuable. I have no value and I don't deserve like material value, which is all very Venusian themes. And I've just connected this as you were talking. And I've known that I've been having this transit. And it's interesting that you're talking about the layers, right? Because Saturn with the layers will keep revealing the same lesson over and over again, but in different variations. So it's like you learn it on this level, but let's learn it on this level, and let's learn it on this level. And I feel like this is almost what you're sharing. I mean, completely different, but from an astrological perspective, when this transit first started happening about 2 years ago, when it was, and I've tracked this and I shared this with my astrology teacher and she was like, that's so cool. She loves hearing retrospectively about transits that you can track and see. It actually played out on my physical being. My neck on my masculine side, my thoracic spine, my shoulder, I would, to the degree that Saturn was sitting at 27 degrees of Pisces, my back would go out. And it was so much physical pain that I've had, whereas there was days where I was like just on drugs, like painkillers, and I couldn't move. And I've been working with practitioners over the last 2 years, and I've been working on this stuff to clear. And now, fast forward to the end of this transit, with this last time that Saturn is going to go over this placement of mine, all the physical stuff is cleared. There's a little bit of like, it just sort of comes up a little bit, but when that belief system came up the other day, I came to you as my practitioner, right? And you did some work for me. And I feel like this story is relevant because you're talking about the psychological, mental part of the triangle, and then you're talking about the spiritual, and then you're talking about the
physical.
Physical. So I've dealt with this on the physical level because my pain is all but gone. And then recently, it's just like this mental blocks. I'm seeing the pattern still playing out. It's like, hang on a minute, my self-worth isn't connected to my work, to how much hard work I do and whatever. And so I go to you, and I felt like you dealt with this for me in such a profound way this past week on the spiritual. And you almost have connected all of those learnings for me to the point where I've had such revelation in my connection to spirit and my spiritual evolution, call it ascension or whatever word you want to add, that I can see that the core belief is almost just like this kind of side note. There's all this other stuff that got uncovered through working with you. And it's almost like, I know as a Piscean, you work with the unseen. And this is why practitioners are so important, and people like you who you're working in the unseen realms, because as a lay person, even a spiritually connected person, I feel the physical pain first. And if I hadn't have known astrology, I wouldn't have related it to that transit. However, it'd be like, my back's out. I'll go and see a chiropractor. It's got nothing to do with that. And then the next level is, I've got these limiting core beliefs. I'll do meditations. I'll do hypnosis. I'll do rewiring of my mental. And then in working with people like you, it's like, hang on a minute, there's this whole other realm of like unseen, spiritual, energetic, like stuff going on that is related to my soul's purpose. Ultimately, this week I've been like, this whole new door has been unlocked in my soul's actual purpose. And my gifts, my ability to channel, my ability to connect with my guides. I've had experiences this week, which I will share one day, that are just profound. And it's because I had a session, one single session with you. And it's like the next layer has been revealed. And I just wanted to share that as a real-time case study of almost like those layers that you were talking about, because I can really resonate with how that's played out for me on a healing level.
Yeah. Because when you get taught kinesiology, and I don't know whether, they talk about this in any other modality, they talk about, the equilateral triangle as being, they call it the mental, the emotional, mental, the physical and the spiritual. But the way that I actually look at that is when someone walks in, it's not equilateral. It's a skewed triangle. Sometimes it's got a big gaping hole in it, and that's a whole nother story. But, you've got to connect the pieces before you can even mold it in. And when I'm working in those three concepts, because they're not individual, as a being, we're made up of all of those things. So while I was talking earlier about, the physical, which we know and we see practitioners, they're still warranted, and the spiritual with all of the themes of that, seeing as one body instead of thinking about them differently. But then, you've got the psychological aspects of that as well, and you've just explained that perfectly. The way I explain it to clients is like molding Play-Doh. You don't get a perfect triangle molding Play-Doh by going, unless you're using a cutter, right? But, but we have no other tools. We've just got our hands. And so it's like when we're going through this process and someone comes to me, it's my job's to decode where those tapestry layers are going wrong and why they're going wrong and where they're going wrong or where the mishap has happened, to make the learning. And then bringing that learning forward and being like, okay, here's this, and this. These are the themes that I can present to you. And here's a handful of tools to kind of take away with and work with to help you continue molding the triangle. And then come back to me when you've got that triangle, because then there's like other layers of that where you knock it, it goes out of shape. So, there's this constant remolding, this constant reweaving over this big picture stuff. And it happens on all three of those planes. And the cool thing with working, I mean, I love working with everyone. There's no bias here with anyone. I love it. However, anyone walks in, they walk in and it's always a new problem to solve. I love that. Like I've got problem solving everywhere, all over me. I love it. But the cool thing working with people, I guess, of your level of frequency is that healing or that recognition or that puzzle piecing or the reweaving happens so much quicker now. It's like in a week you had one session, I think we did a follow on, and it was like a 2-day bender.
It was a 2-day healing bender.
I woke up and I was like trying to work with my energy, and then, half an hour and I'm like getting really frustrated. I'm like, okay, let's just tap into Tara. And then all the downloads came through again. Like the next morning it was like the Tara hangover.
And she's voice noting. She's like, right, we're going deeper here. I've just got some new intel. So this and this. I was like, yes, okay, let's do this.
Which made me think, should I be having like bender offerings for my clients,
Oh, I like that. A healing bender.
Yeah, I don't know whether I want to like sleep on that or not.
Maybe we'll just change the language.
Yeah. And so, it goes deeper, and it's kind of like how you work a little bit. Like when you do astrology for someone, it doesn't just happen in a one session thing. Like you open a portal for somebody, which I love. And I've never seen anyone work like this before. You open a portal to the energy and to the chart, and you let it download over time. And I guess I got to experience that working with you and having this hangover thing going on. Where I call it a bender, and you're like, I open this like portal, and you make it sound so beautiful, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But yeah, it was the things that wanted to come through were hard and fast, and they're like, she's ready. She's ready right now to uncover some of the deeper aspects of what is going on for you to move forward. And, it's profound. And it's not just on your level where you've done a lot of self-work or healing. When you're ready and when someone comes to me, I know they're coming to me because they're ready.
Mm.
And no matter what stage of frequency you're at, what you get as a result is very profound. I've had that because people have told me. I don't just make it up. They're like, I just do what I do and I hope for the best. Do you know what I mean? My intention is for the highest good, right? But yeah, they come back and they're like, so much stuff has shifted since our last session. And the other thing that we need to note is, while for you in this last retrospection or, this journey or healing or whatever we want to call it, realization and recovery happened over 2 or 3 days, you were able to integrate that quickly because you've got everything in that mold, that hand mold, closer to equilateral. Every session is a push or a mold into that equilateral triangle. So the closer that you are in that equilateral triangle, the closer you are in your barometer to your soul self, to your true north. When you get that switch from going down the bottom all over the place or at 180 and you're moving it to 0, even the slightest thing then out of, true north or 0, you'll feel it. And you're like, there's something more for me here. So what we were talking around with the Saturn, using these transits, using these things in your charts to kind of go, you've got neck pain, that happens in, the themes or the consistency or the patterns. Like, everything's a clue.
100%.
Everything is a clue. My girlfriend says to me, Sarah, there's not a clue in everything. There's not a deeper meaning. Well, there is
No,
for
there
me.
is. Me too. I totally agree.
And I have to disagree with her. And then I did actually have the thought this week. It's like, do I need to see everything on this metaphysical level? Well, I do. That's how I work. And this is what I believe in. This is my belief now, that there's a reasoning for things. There's a reason everything's happening. This patterning, all this stuff, you've got this neck pain. There's other reasons to that. When you go to every other practitioner, physical practitioner, Western practitioner or whatever, and they can't fix it, there has to be another reason for it. We're not meant to be in pain. We're not meant to be out of equilibrium with ourselves. And we only kind of know the psychological aspects, like the mental and the emotional of what we deal with, and the physical with going to a doctor or a chiro or an osteo. And we're now moving into this concept of the unknown, the metaphysical, and that having a huge playing impact on how we bring all our bodies together. It's pretty profound when you start getting crazy results with people so quickly, but then even longer periods of time with clients that I'm seeing.
I just want to really zoom in on a point that you just made, which is something that I've just seen really clearly just in this moment. And you and I, we work in such similar ways, although we use completely different modalities and we have completely different skill sets. Like, I don't work in the energetic field the way that you do, but like you said, we hold similar containers for people or have the potential to. In that I open a portal for someone's chart and I wait for the downloads to come in. I wait to work in communication with spirit and equally the person's experiences. So we invite life into the conversation because those lived experiences are the lessons. And then I can relate those to Saturn and to the transits and to how it's all coming together. Almost like your triangle. So your triangle of the physical and the spiritual and the mental, emotional, astrologically, there's these transits and then there's intel that comes through around them. And then there's this person's lived experience and what they bring forward. And we've always said, you and I, in our conversations, that we are both working to support people to find ultimately their higher purpose in this lifetime. And until this moment, I've kind of, I don't know, I haven't made such a deep connection to that until just now, because I can truly see now in the sessions that I had with you how much that when you are in that triangle of like, it's almost like how much the physical and working on healing the physical and healing the emotional stuff, and then which guides you to your spiritual. I feel like that's actually the order. And I know that you probably work on all different layers at all different times and whatever, but like in a logical sense, it's like heal the physical. Like I went to see an osteo for the last 2.5 years and it helped a lot, but I also did the deep emotional work with it. And then I've done the spiritual on top of it. So I still do think we're not discounting physical practitioners at all. I just want to make that point. It works in tandem. And the point I'm trying to make is that once the physical is so important for your purpose, the mental emotional is so important for you to be in alignment with who you're here to be. And then the spiritual is the obvious, like we're spiritually aligned. And I actually have just seen now how important the way you can work with people for them to reach the highest expression of themselves. The same way that I can astrologically, working with the points in their chart, working with their life lessons, working with how they want to express. It's in such a different way, but we're both doing exactly the same thing. And it's so profound because I have just experienced working with you in the last week, a spiritual practitioner, a kinesiologist, a psychic, whatever label you put on it. And I have had the biggest vision and connection to my purpose this last week in such a profound way, to the point where you were even saying things were coming through and you were sharing them to me. And I was like, that's my Uranus placement on my south node, and it's activating my north node, which is my highest purpose. I'm not going to go into the depths of that right now, but like crazy stuff.
I think it's so cool when I have these conversations with you and you've got this connection to another modality and it makes sense on the other layer.
Yes. Because we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
We're just using different language.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Different tools.
And you're right in saying, like, we're not discounting medical practitioners or whatever. Like, there's a purpose there. But then I've worked in medicine streams for 20 years before I started doing this. I still have kind of like a mini side hustle doing work. And the things that I see there with the clients and their stories, because the nurses who do the work go into the stories with the clients to understand their journey, to support their physical healing and what their outcomes are. So, what their goals and outcomes are. And when you actually see and listen and, process those stories, I'm like, there's a whole nother layer happening there with that person that I would love to get my hands on. I would love it, because could you imagine if they've got these beautiful practitioners helping them with their physical and moving them into more of their goals, which might be their purpose, depending on what that is. But then marrying that with like a spiritual aspect of looking at the metaphysical and the deeper tapestry of the lifetimes of experiences that are layering into this one human experience. And the important thing is that I need to always remind myself to bring it back to is the physical density of our experience is one of the most important, because you can't just live in the spiritual. You can't just live in the psychological. You need to embody and balance all of those things into the physical being. And then you'll remove the pains or the chronic conditions or whatever it is. You could go extreme thinking about the capability and the outcomes that you could get. I mean, look at Joe Dispenza with his back stuff. I mean, the stuff that he's done metaphysically with his body to walk again. Like, there's mind-blowing stuff happening when people are combining all of these things together.
And we're going to see more of that coming in the next few years. particularly with transits like Uranus through Gemini and higher connection. What's the language I want to put around that? If Uranus is like our connection to source, it's sometimes described as like God consciousness, and it's bringing it down into the sign of Gemini, which is the personal consciousness, and healing can happen through that. Like our greater ability to connect to different realms, to different frequencies, and the impact that that has on the physical. I mean, Joe Dispenza, like you said, has done studies, he studies people's like physical frequency and brain waves when they go into a meditative state, and then the healing processes that the body goes into once you get people to a certain frequency. And it's profound. And he's not the only one. He's just the most famous one that's doing it, right? There's a lot of people that are working on this level. And yeah, it's just so fascinating.
So fascinating.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, the takeaway is there's huge shifts happening for some of the signs, and I'm calling them the final clearings. There is a lot of urgency around it. Not to create fear. I don't want to create the fear. But if you're already doing some of the work, the time is now to really go to those places that you have been avoiding. So, I talked about the room. It's like find that door and put your hand on the handle or like the window and get out. Get out into the unknown, because that's where the shift happens. That's where you transform. That's where you rise. This is where like everything happens. It's the fear zone, right? When you're in the fear zone, and this is like in one of the other episodes, and we were talking around the collective consciousness, and I said that I had that full feeling of fear or the heart energy. This is the balance. This is the duality that we're dealing with. Like the full extension ends to come to the middle. It's like you can't be in full fear and you can't be in full love energy. You need to be somewhere in the middle where you're balancing it as an individual, but then also as a collective energy. And yeah, we will move out of like this victim mentality to go, there's other ways, there's other information that we haven't been gathering and seeing for us to move into more of our freedoms. And it's a beautiful, beautiful energy.
And if I can just reiterate my experience with this, I don't feel like these final clearings are where we're going back to the beginning or back to this deep dark night of the soul. I feel like a lot of that work has been done. This feels like to me, well, from my own experience, it's just the last. It's like you've cleaned the whole room and it's sparkling and it's vacuumed and you've wiped all the surfaces and it's all cleaned out. And it's like this last little bit of spider web in the corner. You've just got to dust it out and then you're good to go. Like you're good to go, clean slate, next level, next 30-year cycle of Saturn. Like when it moves into that 0 point of Aries, this is for me. It was just like, I needed you to help me just like wipe away those spiritual cobwebs. And I feel like my energy and my frequency and my consciousness, my connection to source has just been up-leveled in such a significant way. So if you feel like things are coming up, if you are a mutable sign or have mutable energy in your chart, even if you don't, I will say on a side note, all of the elements are actually being activated. All of the modalities are being activated in terms of cardinal because we're about to move into Aries and all those cardinal signs will be activated with Saturn and Neptune. Mutable because we're moving out of there. Mutable because the nodes are on a mutable axis. But also the fixed signs because Pluto's in the early degrees of Aquarius. So the Leo and the Taurus, Scorpio axes are always, so nobody's out of the wood. Everybody's doing this together because it's all of these.
Yeah, it's happening.
It's happening for everybody.